Part 1. For 3 days, she sat on the cold wooden bench at the far end of the station, where the ceiling leaked a little when it rained and pigeons strutted like they owned the place. The bench had a splinter that caught her coat every time she shifted, but she didn't mind. Pain was useful. It reminded her she was still here. Trains came and went with punctual indifference, their doors opening like invitations she refused to read. She counted them anyway, 6 on the first day, 8 on the second, 9 on the third, marking time the way sailors once marked stars. Each departure announcement scraped her nerves raw, a metallic voice listing destinations that sounded like other people's lives. Morning smelled of diesel fumes and burnt coffee from the kiosk that never quite opened on time. At noon, sunlight filtered through the high windows and turned dust into drifting constellations. At night, the station grew cavernous and hollow, footsteps echoing too loudly, laughter sounding misplaced and cruel. She wore the same gray coat throughout, the one with the thinning elbows and a button she'd replaced herself years ago, crooked but sturdy. Beneath it, she layered sweaters she'd packed in a hurry, the kind of packing that assumes you'll come back to retrieve what you forgot. Her suitcase, small, scuffed, stubbornly upright, rested against her calf like a loyal dog. People glanced at her with the practiced curiosity reserved for the waiting. Some assumed she'd been stood up. Others thought she was early. A security guard asked once if she needed help, and she shook her head so quickly it startled them both. The truth was simpler and heavier. She was waiting for courage. Courage to buy a ticket to anywhere. Courage to accept that nowhere might be better than where she'd been. She told herself she'd leave after 1 day. Then after 2. By the 3rd, the station had learned her shape. She ate sparingly, an apple the first day, a sandwich the 2nd, coffee whenever her hands shook too much. Hunger sharpened her thoughts, kept memories at bay. When she did sleep, it was sitting upright, chin tucked, arms wrapped around herself as if she could hold her life together by force. Dreams came anyway, a kitchen with a cracked tile she always meant to fix. A promise spoken softly and broken even more quietly. A ring placed on a table instead of a finger. In the dreams, nothing dramatic happened. That was the worst part. Loss arrived without thunder, just the slow realization that someone had stopped choosing you. On the 2nd evening, rain hammered the roof so hard the sound drowned out the announcements. Water ran in thin silver lines down the windows, blurring the city beyond into an abstract painting she could pretend wasn't real. She watched couples hurry past, shoulders touching, sharing umbrellas and plans. A woman her age kissed a man goodbye with the confidence of return. She looked away before envy could harden into something uglier. She had promised herself she wouldn't become bitter. Waiting was one thing, souring was another. The 3rd night was the coldest. The station's heaters failed, and she pressed her palms together, breathing into them like a child. A man with a guitar played for a while near the ticket machines, his case open, his songs familiar enough to sting. She dropped a coin without stopping, embarrassed by the sympathy that rose in her throat. After midnight, the station thinned to ghosts, cleaners with tired eyes, travelers sleeping on backpacks, a cat that slunk along the tracks as if guarding secrets. She slept in snatches, waking each time a train roared through without slowing, its wind tugging at her hair like a reminder. Dawn came pale and unforgiving, painting the platform in the color of old bones. She stood on stiff legs and decided this would be her last day. The decision felt fragile, like glass held up to the light. She would choose a destination before noon. She would not look back. She straightened her coat, adjusted the handle of her suitcase, rehearsed the act of moving forward. That was when a small shadow fell across her shoes, and a pair of muddy boots, too big, laced wrong, stopped in front of her, as if the station itself had finally decided to answer her waiting. Part 2. The boots were scuffed at the toes and damp along the seams, leaving faint half-moons of mud on the concrete. They didn't fidget. They planted themselves with intention, like their owner had decided something important and was willing to stand there until the world agreed. She followed the boots upward to thin legs in worn jeans, then to a blue jacket zipped crookedly, one button missing near the collar. The boy's hair stuck up in a place sleep hadn't forgiven, and his cheeks were pink with cold. He held a paper cup with both hands, steam lifting like a small, brave flag. "You look like you don't have anywhere to go," he said. His voice wasn't rude. It wasn't even curious. It was observational, as if he were stating the weather. She smiled automatically, the kind of smile built for strangers, and said nothing. Words felt too heavy to lift. The boy studied her face with a seriousness that startled her, Children usually glanced and moved on, sensing the gravity of adults they didn't want to touch. He didn't move on. "I'm Ben," he added, nodding once, as though introductions were formal business. "That's Coco. It helps when it's cold." He tipped the cup toward her, not offering it exactly, just making its existence known. She laughed softly despite herself. "Thank you, Ben," she said. "I'm waiting." "That's what Daddy says," Ben replied. "But he says waiting is only good if you know why." Behind the boy, a man hovered, clearly trying to decide whether to intervene or let whatever this was play out. He was tall, with a coat that had seen better winters and eyes ringed by fatigue. He raised a hand, half apology, half warning. "I'm so sorry," he said. "He talks to everyone." "Ben, buddy, it's okay," she said quickly, because something about the boy's earnestness had already hooked her. "I don't mind." She knelt so their eyes were level, the concrete cold through her jeans. "What are you waiting for?" Ben considered this, brow furrowing. "Daddy's train," he said. "It's late sometimes, but it comes." The man smiled at that, a small, crooked thing that carried a lot of history. He stepped closer. "We've been doing this run for a while," he said. "Routine helps." He gestured to the cup. "Coco helps too." Ben took a breath, the way divers do, filling his chest with courage. "My mommy went to heaven," he said, matter of fact, like a lesson learned. The man flinched, but didn't stop him. "Daddy tries," Ben went on. "But the house is very quiet. Quiet makes the walls loud." He shifted his weight, boots scraping. "Will you marry my daddy instead?" The words landed softly and exploded all at once. Heat rushed to her face. She felt the station tilt. The man turned scarlet. "Ben," he said, mortified. "I'm so sorry." He doesn't mean. "I do," Ben said, unwavering. "I thought about it." She searched the boy's face for a joke, a trick, something rehearsed. There was none, just a child's logic stitched together from grief and hope. She swallowed, the lump in her throat aching. "That's a very big question," she said gently. "Bigger than Coco." Ben nodded. "I know. That's why I asked you." He pointed with his chin toward the bench. "You waited 3 days," he said. "I counted. Daddy says waiting can change things." The man stared at the bench, then at her. Realization flickering. "We noticed you," he admitted. "I didn't mean." "It's all right," she said. And she meant it. She stood, brushing grit from her knees, and met the man's eyes. Up close, he looked steadier than he had from afar, like someone who had learned how to keep going without making a show of it. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said. The words were inadequate, but honest. He nodded. "Eli," he said, "and thank you for being kind." "He's persistent." Ben grinned, victorious. "So," he said, rocking on his heels. "Will you?" She crouched again, closer this time, and placed a hand over the cup to steady its wobble. "I can't promise that," she said softly. "But I can promise something smaller." She smiled. "I can promise to have Coco with you. Maybe soup too. There's a diner across the street." Ben beamed, satisfied with the compromise. Eli hesitated, then nodded, relief loosening his shoulders. As they walked toward the exit together, she glanced once more at the bench she'd claimed for 3 days. It looked smaller now, less like an anchor and more like a place you pass through. The station announcements faded behind them, and for the first time in days, she didn't feel like she was leaving anything unfinished. Part 3. They didn't marry that day. Not even close. What happened instead was far simpler, yet infinitely more transformative. They shared cocoa, thick and hot, in a small diner just across from the station. The windows were fogged with the breath of early commuters and the steam of countless cups, and the smell of fried bread and sugar made her feel untethered from all the waiting that had weighed her down. Ben sat in a high chair, swinging his legs, eyes wide with the quiet triumph of having made something happen. Eli, his father, sat beside him, rubbing at his collar nervously, as if any moment now the world might insist they leave, and he'd fail to protect this fragile moment. She sat opposite them, still clutching her coat around her shoulders like armor, yet feeling a strange lightness she hadn't known for weeks. They talked first about small things, the taste of cocoa, the pigeons that lingered too long on the station roof, the lost and found box where forgotten umbrellas went to die. Ben told stories of trains that never came, and she laughed at the exaggerations, marveling at how freely joy could come from such a serious little boy. Eli stayed quieter, but when he spoke, it was measured and kind, his words offering pieces of himself without demanding anything in return. For the first time, she realized that connection didn't have to be explosive. Sometimes it came in tiny increments, a shared smile, a hand brushing lightly against a coat, a story told over hot cocoa. As the afternoon unfolded, they left the diner together. The station loomed behind them, distant now, a place of waiting that no longer held power over her. Eli offered her a ride in his old car, a vehicle that groaned and rattled in sympathetic agreement with the boy's excitement. She accepted, surprised at herself, and felt a thrill in surrendering to something uncertain for once. On the drive, Ben told her about the house they lived in, the squeaky floorboards, the crooked doorframe, the tiny backyard where dandelions refused to be tamed. Each detail made the house feel alive, and slowly, she felt the idea of home softening in her chest, not as a memory she had lost, but as a place she could help create. Over the following weeks, their routines intertwined. She visited on weekdays, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes helping Ben with homework, sometimes just sitting and listening. Eli learned to trust her presence without feeling watched, and she learned to exist in the house without feeling displaced. Ben had a way of claiming spaces in the most unorthodox manner. His favorite chair became hers temporarily, a windowsill turned into a reading nook. It was a strange kind of family forming, built not from blood or obligation, but from repeated gestures of care and respect. Slowly, affection seeped in. It was quiet, patient, and steady, more durable than the passion she had once mistaken for love, and more profound than the longing that had kept her sitting on that station bench for 3 days. On a crisp morning, months later, she found herself standing at that same station again. The benches looked smaller now, the tracks quieter, and the announcements less urgent. She wasn't waiting, not for trains, not for courage, not for miracles. She was passing through. The station was no longer a threshold of loneliness but a memory of the patience it had taken to find her place in a different life. Ben waved from the car parked outside, boots muddy as ever, a grin that could make the clouds seem thin and soft. Eli leaned against the car, smiling at her like a man who had finally learned that the heart could expand without breaking. She waved back, a wave heavier than greeting, lighter than farewell. In her hand, she traced the small ring on her finger, a gift from Eli, a promise made not in the heat of passion but in the warmth of continuity. The ring caught the morning sun, a tiny reflection of the life she had almost missed by waiting too long, by fearing the unknown. She realized that some questions in life, big questions, the ones that seemed impossible to answer, don't require immediate resolution. Some questions are answered by showing up, by staying present, by participating in the slow accumulation of trust, laughter, and small victories. As the train roared past, she didn't flinch. She didn't even glance at the departing carriages. She had learned the art of timing, knowing when to wait, and knowing when to step forward. Love, she understood now, was not always dramatic. Sometimes, it arrived in cocoa and soup, in muddy boots and crooked jackets, in repeated invitations and shared silences. And for the first time in months, she felt like she belonged, not to the station, not to the past, but to a home built of hands that held her gently and eyes that saw her fully. Ben jumped into the backseat, chattering about trains and clouds and whether dandelions could really be stubborn. She laughed, sliding into the passenger seat next to Eli, and as the car pulled away from the station, she realized she had found a place where waiting no longer meant standing still, it meant arriving at exactly the right moment, in the company of people who mattered most. The station receded into the distance, but the lessons it had taught her, the courage to wait, the grace to respond, the strength to choose, traveled with her, tucked quietly into her coat like a secret she would carry forever.